Deadpool and Wolverine is the most pessimistic critic's vision of what it might be. Bloated, muddled, emotionally confused, not really accomplishing anything, failing to use the building blocks of story to create a tale about people going on a journey of genuine discovery, instead coming across more as a high-tech, mimetic theme park exhibit of different expensive properties, and trying to cover it all up with action, jokes, CGI, and cameos. If you came expecting a Wolverine dramatic story equal to or roughly in the league of Historian Logan, you will be disappointed. And the same is true if you expect Deadpool's dramatic plot to be as good as his previous plots. Their arcs, strictly speaking, don't seem like they make a lot of sense within the worlds they've established. There are many moments of great performance and great dedication from the cast and the story, but the pieces just don't line up in a way that makes for a harmonious, logical whole. People who go in expecting an emotional arc that will actually satisfy them and provide catharsis will probably be disappointed, even if they don't realize exactly why. But that's not that big a sin. In surveying the context around this film, how it was made 6 years after the last one, how COVID-19 disrupted the flow of creation, how the acquisition of the movie Deadpool by the Disney company affects production down the line, and considering the million other directions all the creators are being pulled in, you can see why this entry might not be as polished as its predecessors. They wanted to make another one of these, and we wanted them to make it. But so long after the previous two films, it's harder to build on the narrative strengths. And what's resulted is a kind of accidental solo entry that doesn't really involve much of Deadpool's supporting cast in a way that feels like development, and feels more like, perhaps fittingly, a one-off comic book taking place separately from the main story. And that's probably the best way to think about it. Don't treat it as a continuation of the previous film's story. Treat it as a one-off. A chance to get the Wolverine character back, do some fun stuff, and really make the most out of the Disney merger, which of course provided a million joke opportunities for a character like Deadpool. With all that said about the product as a whole, the rest of the movie is very fun. They worked their butts off to make this entertaining. The opening scene is guaranteed going to be one of the craziest things you see in film all year, and possibly one of the funniest. The film is crammed end to end with cameos. With its premise of the heroes stuck in a world between worlds, where unwanted scraps of the universe are sent, there are bountiful opportunities for appearances from characters you might have seen before, or might not have, but that are bound to tickle your fancy in some way. If you're a fan of Marvel comic books in any context, you're going to have a good laugh watching them. And if you're the higher tier fan that Marvel has cultivated, that reads the comics, that's been following the movies, that watches even the old stuff, you're going to feel like you're being catered to enormously, because you are. The film is essentially a kind of goulash. All of the leftovers of the Disney and Fox Marvel movies being thrown together in the same pot and emerging as a surprisingly charming, wildly audacious adventure stew. And the action, as always, is impeccable. Matching its predecessors, the action in this film is some of the tightest, most creative, most dense work that you've ever seen. And the jokes match, frequent, diverse, often amusingly vulgar, and likely to entertain widely. The film is, in many ways, just as good as the ones before it. And that's why the flaws stick out a little. When everything else is so good, you can't help noticing the little beats and moments that don't quite match everything else. In ways, it reminds me of 1991's Hook, where so many things about it are so fantastic and magical that the little beats that don't quite land create a bit of incongruence, a beauty mark, an uncanny valley, an impression that despite its outward excellence, something in what you're watching isn't quite in place with its peers. But when you're out for a night with your friends, you don't need everything about a movie to make sense. It just might stick with you afterwards that something didn't. And that's why this review's here, to explain what. Deadpool and Wolverine's financial success seems all but assured. It's already doing great financially, it's likely going to do great for the rest of the summer, and it's a huge comic franchise, so I'm sure there are a million merchandising opportunities that they're already rolling out. They even have an Old Spice scent. If you are the type of person who thinks you like Deadpool or already like him, in all his profane, violent, but still soulful glory. You'll like this. If you're someone who, like many of us, is lamenting the death of narrative culture and how every movie is a franchise and not a story, and thinks superheroes are played out and lame, you're not going to like this. This film definitely indulges in a lot of the sins of being a franchise, in not being a strict narrative that makes sense by itself, but a narrative that relies on you remembering this other cool thing that happened once, so you'll go, ooh, when it shows on screen. But that's not the worst thing to be. Big events like this can come across as overly cynical, money-driven products, but all movies are money-driven products. The dollar is driving all of our viewing choices, no matter how anyone spins it, and there's no such thing as story-driven films being destroyed, just difficulty in getting them distributed. In 10 years, people will be producing feature films in their backyard over the summer, and they'll be good. The entry bar for film only keeps getting lower and lower, and people keep finding ways to make it cheaper and more self-sufficient. There is nothing a franchise can do that is so powerful that it will destroy your ability to find or appreciate a more human-driven story. And Deadpool understands that. The Deadpool character is an embrace of the flexibility of story, an understanding that everything has a formula, everything has bits that make it tick, and everything can be viewed with disdain if viewed from far enough away and with the right sense of dismissal, but that things are still worth what they're worth anyway. And in that spirit, I encourage you to go enjoy Deadpool and Wolverine, if that's what you're into.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.